My name is Kiara. I'm project coordinator at Nordic Pioneers, and we're currently doing this video podcast to inspire youth to take action by highlighting personal stories of activists and social entrepreneurs. And we're starting with our jury members. And today we have you, Elísabet. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us your age, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself?
Of course. My name is Elísabet Brynjarsdóttir, and I will go by Elizabeth. That's completely fine internationally. I'm recently 30 years old, which was kind of a shock, but that happens. And I'm from Iceland, and I'm currently residing in Hafnarfjörður, which is close to Reykjavik. Just moved back from Canada, so I lived in Vancouver for about a year. So yeah, good to be back in the Nordics.
Nice. And what were you doing? I remember the last time we spoke, you were in Vancouver, I think. Was it
Yeah.
Vancouver? And
Yes.
what were you doing there?
So I was just finishing my graduate degree. So I'm a nurse, and I've been a nurse for, I can't remember how long, 5 years now. I graduated in 2017. It feels way longer, but because of COVID. But I decided to pursue my graduate degree at the University of British Columbia. So I just finished that in December. It was like a 1-year master's degree about leadership and policy. So like how you can influence policy. So hopefully we can make the health and welfare system a bit better in Iceland, but we'll
Mhm.
see.
Yeah. And well, congrats on completing your master's then. That's
Thank
pretty
you.
big.
Thank
Um,
you.
and what were you doing on the side there? There were some projects. Weren't you a research assistant or something, or do I remember?
Yes, yes. So so on the side, I was a student ambassador for the University of British Columbia, and just trying to create a good society for the students of my cohort. We were like about 180 people from all over the world, so it's like an international program. So I was a student ambassador, but I was also employed 20 hours a week as a research assistant. And I still work with Dr. Angela Rusalillo, who is an amazing young researcher based in Vancouver. And she is researching basically health equity and how we can create health systems that everyone can access and have access to, that respects everyone's rights to service, and basically support everyone based on their needs. And we have been focusing especially on the homeless population in Vancouver and people who use drugs. So and women, and then we've also incorporated a little bit of planetary health, so how the climate change is impacting homeless people and health equity. So it's a lot, but I feel like we're just barely scratching the surface with the research. It's a really amazing and emerging field of research. And there's a lot of activism in research. I did not like fully realize how much activism there is in research, because research, once you have it in your hands, like the results of an intense study, you can actually, like, I feel like as a like former young activist, sometimes I hit barriers where I would be like, well, what do you have to back up those claims? So now I'm trying to back up all my claims about what kind of a society I want to live in.
Mhm. With your own research, huh? So
Yeah, trying and working with like
yeah,
like-minded people, right? It's all about finding people who are like-minded, because we can't do it all. So it's been amazing, definitely.
yeah, it sounds like it, and it sounds like your sort of scope of activism is very broad, and it seems like you
Yeah.
do a lot of things. Can I start by asking, like, when did you realize that there was something wrong in your society or something that you wanted to change?
It's actually a great question, because when you kind of have to sit down and think back, like, when did I start behaving in a certain kind of way? It's hard to pinpoint a point in my timeline, because I feel like for me, it kind of boiled down to how I was raised. So my granddad was a really, how do you explain it? He was really like, he didn't really trust authority, but he really wanted to build a better community for the people in the community. And that kind of mindset followed him wherever we went together. I spent some time with him, my grandfather, when he was getting older, and also when I was younger. And the outlook on life, that kind of outlook on life, to kind of like raise questions where you need to, and also strive to create a better society for everyone. It kind of followed me throughout my life. So no matter what I did, that was always kind of my core and my why. My mother is an amazing nurse. She's been working within the field of cancer nursing for 30 plus years. And I just remember going to the stores with her and people coming up to her and thanking her. And she would be like, and I would be like, who is that, mom? And she was like, I have no idea. But like that kind of moments when I was younger, that kind of like stuck with me throughout. So when I was kind of like thinking about this question, like when did I realize there was something wrong? I think it's you always see adversities wherever you go, whoever you talk to. People always have their stories about something that could have gone better. The system failed them in some kind of way, no matter who you talk to, really. And when you kind of start listening to other people's stories, you hear that there is something wrong in our society. So I feel like at a really, really young age, it was kind of implemented in me to kind of question authority and kind of raise questions, but in a from a positive place. Like I do it from a place where I want to create a better system, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Was there
Yeah.
any area that sort of sprung out to you or something that you felt more passionately about?
Well, it start well, we I all kind of go through the phase of like, what do I want to be when I grow old, right? I had no clue. I wanted to be an actress. I wanted to be in the culture scene. I wanted to be an architect. I wanted to be a clown. Like I wanted to do so many things, but then I wanted to be a doctor because my other grandfather, he was a doctor, and he passed away when I was really young, and I used to hear stories about him. So I wanted to be a doctor, but that didn't work out, and I was like, okay, I just said that my mother is a nurse, and she was always like, don't do nursing. But I ended up trying nursing, and I think nursing kind of focused my attention to like human rights, and it's people usually don't understand that connection, but for me it makes perfect sense that nurses are like advocates with their patients and with the population they're serving. So when I started studying nursing, I was like, okay, this is it. This is like, I want to change my community for the better, and I can do that with the community. I don't want to like take up space where I don't have to be because it isn't about me, but I can support voices that need to be heard through my work. So I'm a really political kind of person, and not in a like, I've never been in like politics, but I'm like formal politics, but I'm like I believe everything comes down to politics, and like I need to understand it to be able to change society and participate in change. So I think that's kind of where it started. So like starting to be a nurse. But once I started studying nursing, that's when it all happened. Like I participated in starting the school strikes for climate in Iceland, and I participate like that's where my climate activism came in, and then I founded a mental health organization with other students, and that's where my interest in mental health came in, and then I got introduced to harm reduction, and that's how I found out about the homeless crisis and opioid crisis. So it's like, but it's all rooted in kind of like wanting to create a better society for everyone who lives in it, right? That's
Yeah,
so I don't know if that answers the question, but
no, it definitely
I've
does.
yeah.
And I wanna touch on all those things that you just mentioned, all
Yeah.
those projects. But first going back to like politics,
Yeah.
In the Nordic countries, we usually boast a quite like progressive mindset, and we have progressive policies when it comes to human rights. But in what ways would you say that it falls short?
So in day-to-day life, it falls short. Being a nurse, I'm out there in the community with the people, and you can see how laws, legislations, and rules, and the structure of our society, how it's working, and it's often not working for everyone. So I think um, we are really good at marketing ourselves as being really progressive. And I experienced that firsthand when I moved to Canada. Everyone was like Iceland, the Nordics, like feminism and everything. And I'm not saying that's not correct, but I am saying that I have worked with vulnerable populations in our society. In Iceland, Iceland is tiny, but we still have roughly 800 people living on the streets. We have youth who are living on the streets, youth who are using drugs from 12 years old. Like there's a lot, like I see it in the community, and I see how the structure of our society isn't built for all. So I think that's the clearest answer I could give. I have a lot of examples, but also once you start just talking to people in the community, like talking to women who have experienced sexual harassment, talking to refugees, talking to homeless people, talking to like your mother. Like my mom has met some adversities as well. So like when you hear people's stories, you can definitely see how the policies are not always perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, well put. Um, so yeah, let's talk about your activism now.
Yeah.
In 2020, you were awarded the Outstanding Young Icelander Prize.
Yes.
And clearly, rightfully so. I mean, your track record with volunteering and leadership and social action is very impressive. Was there a specific initiative that prize was awarded to you for?
So I had to like look it up to be completely honest because I got the award during COVID, and it was such a crazy time for me because I was working at the Red Cross then, building up services for the homeless population. And then the COVID crisis hit, and I was trying to figure out how we protect people who don't have homes to isolate themselves. And then I had a knock on the door at my place of work, and I was the only person at my workplace. And it was like the committee giving me the award. And I was like, what's going on? And I had no idea what was going on
Had
because
you heard of it before?
yeah, I had heard of it, but I was like, I knew I was being nominated, but there were so many amazing people who were nominated. And I was like, well, um, I like, that's amazing. So I was like, not thinking about it. I was checking the news every day. And then I had that knock on the door, and saw an amazing speech from our president. And I was like, I couldn't wrap my head around it, but I think it was due to my contributions to like philanthropy and volunteering. So I'm not sure if it was like for Fru Ragnir, which is the services for the homeless population, or if it was for the climate strikes, or if it was for my presidency at the student council of the University of Iceland, because we kind of fought for the rights of young refugees there. But I think it was contributions overall. to be
Crazy.
to be like completely honest, I think it
Yeah.
was that. And I'm not being disrespectful to the award because I was so deeply humble,
Mhm.
and my outlook on it as well is that I'm doing my job, right? Like when I show up to work as a nurse, I'm doing my job. But I think I had to come to terms with it that I was getting an award, which was really complicated for me because I'm not doing this to be awarded, right? So I had this talk to my mother, and she was like, it's okay. You are doing your job and you're not seeking like reward for that, but you're also doing a lot of stuff that you don't have to do. So I was like, okay, I will accept it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's complicated emotions, right? Because young people who are getting recognized for social work, for their society, it's often it often comes from a place where they're not trying to gain recognition or trying to advance in society. It's often genuine and like wanting to create a better world, right? So when you are nominated for something you've done, I can imagine that a lot of people share the same emotion, that like it's not just me, it's everyone who's done it, right? So it's complicated, but it's been humbling for sure, and I had to work through those emotions and come to terms with it, and I'm proud as well. I today I can say I'm proud, but
That's
I
good.
was it was a lot of emotions at that time.
Yeah, yeah. But you should be proud. But I mean,
Thank you.
even so, even if obviously you weren't doing these things for the recognition, but why do you think these types of awards are important, both for you as an individual and also for like society to see these people getting, yeah, getting this type of
Yeah.
recognition?
You know what? I had to ask that question as well to a lot of people who have like been my mentors throughout. Like everything I know and everything I'm doing does not come from me inventing the wheel, right? I've had a lot of conversations with amazing people that help me understand what I'm dealing with. And I had that conversation with one of my mentors. Her name is Dr. Helga Sif, and she was a trailblazer in the field of harm reduction within nursing. Um, and she said that it's not only an award for you, it's also for the cause that you are fighting for. So the cause I'm fighting for is also being recognized as being important in society. So I think that's like the simplest answer I can give you, but it definitely raises the voices, and I'm going to put it plurally because there's a lot of people behind my award that shared amazing stories with me, stories I had never experienced myself before about being homeless or not being able to buy food or etc. And I could like they helped me understand as a nurse how to create a better system, right? So it's not me, it's the cause that I'm talking about,
Yeah,
if
that's a
that
very good
makes
answer.
sense.
I completely agree with you on that. And
Yeah.
um yeah, so let's talk a bit about the youth engagement side of your activism.
Yeah.
Um you have a history of volunteering with this. Specifically you mentioned at your time at university. Why would you say this is important to you?
History of volunteering with youth engagement. So it's still so important to me. I still feel like a youth. I am getting less relevant, but but I will say that like the sense of belonging from participating in all kinds of youth engagement for a greater cause has definitely helped me grow as a person in the society as well. So for students, when I was a student at the University of Iceland, I will be honest, I lacked role models as a nursing student. There's a lot of them now that I see, but when I was a student, I was looking for like more political role models, like activists, like who's doing something that I believe in. And I found out that no nurse student had been the president of the student council of the university. And the student council is old; it's like 100 something years old, and it's usually students from other disciplines. So it wasn't my intention, but I ended up being voted the president, and it's a full-time job, right? Um, and what it brought me was a sense of belonging in a community of students, but also being trusted with leading that community towards higher ups, right? So the university, the government, everyone, and being that voice that enters the meetings, has a seat at the table and says, well, listen, this is not going to work. So it's important because if we don't do this, even though my position ended up being paid, I did 4 years of volunteering in student politics. Um, it's important because if we don't do it, decisions will be made for us. And we need to find ways to be included in a conversation, even though people told me I don't understand yet, I'm too young to understand. um, just focus on your studies, just focus on being a nurse. Be a good girl. um, I never listened to it, and I was like, well, I'm a part of this society, so I have something to say about it. And I think that's a key message I tell everyone. Like, everyone has something to say about the society they live in, no matter who they are, or if people don't think they are relevant. And some groups in our society need more space than others, and youth is definitely one group in our society that needs more space, and we need to create spaces for youth. That's why I'm so proud to be a part of the Nordic Pioneer jury, because that's exactly what the prize is doing. Like, the prize is promoting and creating more space within the Nordics for youth, and their amazing accomplishment. Like, being a part of the jury and reading everyone's bios, I'm like, wow, like this, yeah, I could go on and on, but that's why youth engagement and volunteering and everything is so important, in short.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, reading these, yeah, the applications and the stories of these young people, it's super uplifting and inspiring, and it really does
Amazing.
motivate you to do your own good things out in the world. So it's definitely
Exactly.
something I believe in as well. But what did in your time in this like student council, what did your engagement focus on? You said you were advocating for some different like students' rights, or what was it?
Yeah, my year focused on there was a lot of different things, but I think the highlights for me were more student housing, because there was a lot of students on the wait list for student housing, and do not have access to housing in Iceland. So that's definitely unequal access to education, right? Equal access to education, right? Yes. Okay. Wow, that was a mouthful. Also, we were finding ways to support young refugees who wanted to seek education in Iceland, and were being age assessed by the university, unfortunately, to prove if they are younger or older than 18. And this is just like morally so wrong, because like the University of Iceland stands for equal access to education. So we fought that battle with the refugee students who wanted to become a student in Iceland, and that battle was won 2 years later. I wasn't a president then
Mhm.
still, but it was won, and the university isn't doing that anymore. and and then mental health. I'm a nurse, so obviously I care about health and the mental health of students, and the university community was so important to me personally, and to everyone who was working with me at that time. So we fought for more psychologists on site, like on campus, so people could have free access to therapy during their studies. And that went through as well. There was more funded granted for that. So there's a lot I could touch on, but I think these three like pillars, what I was and climate strikes, of course, the school strikes for climate, that was a big one.
How can you
That was a
forget?
big one.
Yeah.
I'll never really forget when Greta Thunberg quote retweeted our strikes in tiny Iceland, and I was like, yeah, okay, we're doing it. But and we're still striking. The youth in Iceland is still striking every Friday. It's amazing. So being a part of something that starts and is still going for a great cause, like, that's the best feeling ever.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not relevant anymore, but it's the best feeling
Well,
ever.
I mean, you were part of it, and it's great, yeah, to see it flourish.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, with working with such big themes like equality and mental health,
exactly.
it can very quickly get overwhelming. What were some of the challenges that you faced, and how did you manage to keep up the motivation?
um, that's a really good question. I so often felt alone, um, because when you lead something, or you are starting something, or you're fighting for something, you sometimes feel like no one's listening to you because you don't see the changes right away. Um, And the system moves slowly, unfortunately, often, but changes can happen faster if you like. It can happen. But I think for me, what I did was kind of like keep things with myself, and kind of like I didn't want to burden anyone else with all the stuff I went through. I got like death threats. I got my family was threatened at one point. So it's like it's dark stuff and it's heavy stuff, and I kind of like I was like, well, no one's gonna do that in Iceland. So I kind of like brushed it off, but it stuck with me like years later. So I definitely like, if I could speak to myself like 10 years ago, I would say like find like-minded people and create a community where you can share in a safe way without it impacting the cause. So like I never wanted things to like revolve around how I was feeling. I wanted it to be focused on the cause I was like fighting for. So I think my best advice would be like find people you can trust, where you can share safely about what you're going through um, without it impacting the cause and being like um, pub- published that you feel like this, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't like, I always thought I don't want to be a target. Like I don't want to give them a target on my back so the cause suffers, right? So I've always thought like, yeah. So I think that's definitely, and I've done that the past 5 years. Like I've found people I can trust and like shared what I was going through, and they do it back to me as well. So that's definitely finding your own sense of belonging and community is also important when you're fighting for a big cause. Definitely.
Absolutely. That's horrible to hear. I'm sorry that you went through that. That's so bizarre.
Yeah.
But good advice.
Yeah.
So you also co-founded a mental health awareness organization called Hugrun. I'm probably
Hurun.
butchering the
Yeah.
pronunciation, but in what, so was this like an extension of your work in the student council, or what sort of work did you do here, and can you explain a bit what that was?
Yeah, I'll definitely try to keep it short. It was a really big organization, and it still is today. I did that before I became the president of the student
Okay.
council. So I got to know a lot of students who were like-minded through student politics, and we were all talking about how what's missing. And there was like this huge wave in society where young people were stepping out and sharing their stories and telling people, I'm not taboo. This is my story. This is my reality. I deserve support and understanding. So we were all kind of students in the field of health sciences, and we were like talking about like, is there something here that we can do, because this is such an important cause. So a few of us decided to found an organization called Hurun, and it's basically it's an organization of university students who go through intensive training to become educators, and then they go to schools at like a younger age, to kind of like from like 16 to 19 years old, to educate them on mental health. So it's kind of like a peer-based talk about mental health, and the university students also go through an intensive training and learn a lot themselves. So it's a kind of a community based volunteering services, and everyone does this voluntarily. And I think I co-founded it, and then a year later I was the president of that organization as well. And we opened up a website with accessible material on like human language, right? So like humans can go and actually read about stuff and not like read something the doctor or the nurse wrote you. It was like, okay, let's talk about mental health, and it's still accessible. And there's some material there that was developed after I left for parents to talk to their kids about mental health. Amazing stuff. They've translated it to Polish, because we have a really big Polish population in Iceland, which is amazing. So yeah, it's still flourishing, and it's an amazing organization. And yeah, Hurun, it's difficult for people who don't speak Icelandic, but if anyone who's from Iceland is watching, it's still accessible. Yeah.
That's good. How old were you when you co-founded it?
Gosh, 2020. I want to say 23, 22.
Yeah. And how would
Yeah.
you say the process was of getting that up and running, especially at such a young age?
It was actually really, I don't want to say it's easy, but it was actually because there was this momentum in our society. So when we started talking about it, people were like, yes, like let's do it. And I think when you have amazing ideas about to do something that's better for your society, I think where people fall sometimes short is like complicating it. So like making it too complicated to start. So we kind of just said, okay, let's do it. We just believed in ourselves and the cause. And it's not, again, it's not about us, it's about the cause, right? It's about mental health for youth. So we were kind of like, let's do it. And every time we spoke to someone, like, can you support us on the material we're developing for the education material? Everyone, like the professors at the university, they were willing to do it voluntarily as well. So when you have like such a clear focus on the cause and like you're rooted in your why, like I'm doing this for youth mental health, people are actually willing to help you out. So like my advice would be go for it and like do a worst case scenario analysis. Like what's the worst case scenario? Usually it's okay. Like your reputation is still going to be fine and people will forget in 5 days if it goes horribly wrong, but I would say go for it and just see see how it grows, because sometimes things don't grow and that's okay, and sometimes they do grow and that's amazing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we've heard similar opinions from a lot of the other jury members, so there must be some truth to it.
I hope
But
so.
yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, looking
Yeah.
at the history of all of you. But yeah, let's move on to your work with nursing and with harm reduction.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, your work expanded to sort of harm reduction projects, helping, you said, homeless and substance using populations.
Hmm.
And this started in Iceland with the Red Cross,
Yeah.
or okay. And what were your responsibilities here?
Um, I started out as a volunteer,
Mhm.
and I got to know this amazing project with the Red Cross, Icelandic Red Cross, through Hurun, the mental health organization, because we were developing the education material and we wanted to focus on harm reduction. So that's how we got to know it. Um, I started out as a volunteer, and then I was kind of what do you call it? Recruited to be like to join the team as a nurse because I was graduating. And I just said yes, why not? This is my passion, and I want to work towards a goal that where we can actually improve something. So to begin with, I was focusing on the health services, and I was working with Svala, an amazing mentor who taught me everything to know about harm reduction. Um, and then 2 years later, she quit, and I became the project lead. And then COVID hit, and I've touched on that a little bit, but basically, I was working with a really misunderstood and stigmatized population. I was working with 120 volunteers. I was the only one, or the one out of two employees. So my phone was ringing day and night for 4 years straight. It's not a job I could have done for a really long time, unfortunately, because I had to set boundaries. But during like the forming stages of the services we were developing, it was important. I feel like obviously there should be more funding put towards these kind of services for this population, but that's a huge topic I'm not going to touch on. Um, and leading volunteers is it's also humbling, because again, it's not about me leading them. It's about me creating a project that they want to spend their free time volunteering on, right?
Yeah.
So I always did it with them. Like, how can I create the best situation for you to be able to give this service. And then with the population, I never did anything without consulting them. Like, what do you need? What kind of services do you need? The services we are providing, are they outdated? Do we need to update anything? Like, how did you feel coming into our vehicle? It was like a mobile outreach vehicle offering harm reduction, needle exchange services, HIV and hepatitis C tests, everything like that. So it's like consulting with the population. There's nothing about them without them. And today we're seeing this population more like they have a stronger voice. Their voices were always strong, but they are being heard, like, and they are speaking for themselves, which was my personal ultimate goal. Like, I should not be speaking for them, and now they are speaking for themselves, which is amazing. So yeah, and really I could talk forever about that project, but it led me to my it's a full circle moment in this interview, because this role led me to my master's degree, which I was just finishing. And that master's degree kind of introduced me to planetary health, which is like the health of our planet. And that kind of combines everything I've been doing for the past 10 years. It's like social determinants of health. It's like refugees fleeing their home countries because of climate change. It's like health equity. How do our systems adapt to the changing climate? Like everything. So it's been like the last 10 years have been intense, hard, but it's a full circle moment, and I'll probably go another circle in
Yeah.
the next 10 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've already touched a bit on sort of working with a group that's misunderstood and stigmatized.
Yeah.
But based on your experience, what would you say is your advice for other young people wanting to work with groups like this? Maybe towards like you've already mentioned towards, I mean, including their voices and talking to them, obviously, about a problem that concerns them.
Yeah.
But to the outside society, what would you say your advice is, if that makes sense?
Be- Um, I know I just said go for it, but
Yeah.
I would say before you go for it, just take
Hmm.
a moment with yourself, write down why you're doing it. If you're doing it for yourself, like check yourself. If you've never been homeless and you want to work with the homeless population, figure out your why
Hmm.
and then enter the project focusing on your why.
Hmm.
Because it, like, when we have more power in any kind of situation, like I have a lot of power as a nurse when I'm working with a patient, I need to check myself like every hour because it can so quickly unintentionally become about me or like my feelings or like my experiences. So whenever you're like if you want to work with vulnerable populations, if you want to go into leading a volunteer project, if you want to start something new and get people with you, like just take a moment with yourself and be honest, and like no one's watching. Like if you're having a conversation with yourself, no one's watching, no one's judging you. You can just have a moment with yourself and be like, why am I doing this? And just check in with yourself every now and then, and be sure you have the support you need throughout it as well, because sometimes you need to take a step back and it's okay, that's fine. And like life will go on if you need to take a step back as well. Like another huge piece of advice, like don't become the person that something can't go on without, because the biggest gift for me was being able to step out of projects, doing something new, and watch the projects grow, because a lot of people want to see them grow as well. It like I'm not the only one who can see it grow. So yeah, that's another, like, you don't want to um experience nothing going on without you, right? So like igniting that spark with other people, and then like being like, it's okay if I'm not there all the time.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Another good piece of advice. Um, yeah, I mean, I could come up with an endless list of questions as well surrounding your work in
Yes,
this
of
area because
course.
I find it so interesting. But
Yeah,
we are on a time crunch, so
of course.
I think that I was going to ask you some questions about why you want to be part of the jury and all this, but I think that you've covered that pretty well
Yeah.
in all of your answers. So I think unless there's anything that you want to mention here in the end.
Well, whenever you meet youth who are doing outstanding work, they probably don't know it themselves and they don't hear it often. Don't be afraid to like support them, tell them how amazing they're doing. Offer just like, if you ever need a companion or a like-minded person, I'm here. You can like call me when you need. Like, don't offer advice they don't need. um, and nominate youth to the Nordic Pioneer Prize, obviously, because even though you don't like win, it's a huge platform for like-minded youth who are doing amazing stuff to come together and get support from a like Nordic community of amazing youth. So that's the best way to like kind of end this, I think.
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, that's what we hope to do at Nordic Pioneers. And for people
Yes.
watching, we just opened our nomination platform. So do go and nominate anyone that you think deserves the recognition and the support. Um,
Yes.
but thank you for today, Elizabeth. And
My pleasure.
yeah, so
Thank
nice talking
you.
to you. And you had so many good things to say. And yeah, that's all for
Yes.
today.